So Luke, right at the beginning of this parable, tells us right up front what he thinks the parable's about. It's all about prayer. It's all about the need to pray always and not to lose heart. It might be that the story is about prayer like Luke thinks, but it could be also that it's about more than just prayer. And that it could be that Luke might not have understood this tale completely. Let's see. So the story opens with an unattractive character, a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. It's a terrible set of qualifications for a judge. And immediately after that, we are introduced to another character, a widow, who kept coming to this judge saying, "Grant me justice against my opponent." Now, we don't know anything about the widow's case. Was she just? Was she unjust? We don't know. The nature of the conflict she has with this anonymous opponent is apparently not important for the story. The widow comes to the judge, and not surprising, given what we've been told about the judge, his bad character, he does nothing to help her. Eventually, he changes and he has this little internal dialogue. And it seems like the judge has a pretty good level of self-knowledge. He knows what kind of person he is. He says, "Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice so that she will not wear me out by continually coming." So he seems to almost be at peace with the fact that he's not a very good person. So he might be self-centered, but he's not self-unaware. So that she might not wear me out by continually coming to me. So the translation, that's the NRSV that we heard read. The pith in the Greek has been lost by that translation. The word that's being translated is one Greek word that's been translated with those four English ones is hupopiazo, which at root means to give somebody a black eye or to strike them in the face. So the widow, who in the ancient world has, well, and many times in the modern world, but certainly in the ancient world, has no institutional power, gets her way against a judge who has all sorts of institutional power by being irritating, by being persistently inconvenient and annoying. That's how she gets her way. What she accomplished, what she got the judge to do, was not done because of duty, justice, or love. It was done through irritation. And this is the end of the parable, but Luke has Jesus offer some commentary on the parable at the end. Now, when you see this sort of commentary or the introduction, like we saw at the beginning, the narrator, that often is an addition by either the evangelist, Luke himself, or the tradition. Jesus's parables originally were likely not explained. The whole point of the parable being you had to think about it. You had to work it out yourself, and it was a puzzle. And so telling you right up front what it was all about is kind of working at counter purposes to the whole purpose of telling a parable. So what we have is Luke, or the early church as it happened, when they heard this parable, they thought it was about prayer, and so they understood it that way. And this is reflected again in the commentary that's put onto Jesus's mouth after he has told the parable. Will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he not delight long in helping them? So again, it's about prayer. So in this pitch, if this is about prayer, then who represents God? Who represents God? I'm asking. The judge. So is God like the judge? No. So I'm here grumbling, but no. So in general, it seems like, does anyone think that God is like the judge? Hope not. So did I hear that right? I hope not. Yeah. So Does God act because we irritate God so much? Like, is our prayer like we're just goading God, and God finally says, okay, enough already? Is that what God's like? That would be horrible, wouldn't it? That would be horrible. I mean, I would suggest everybody get out of the church as fast as you can and get away from this thing if that's what God is like. Fortunately, that's probably not how Luke and the early church saw things either. For them, this parable followed a sort of logic that was very common in philosophical arguments back then, very common in rabbinic kind of arguments. It's common today too, but very common back then. And basically, if this is true for X, it's even more true for Y. That's the basic logic. So if the judge, who cares nothing about justice, who cares nothing about people, about God, or about fearing God, if this unjust judge gives the widow the justice she seeks simply because he wants her to go away and leave him alone, how much more will our just God give us justice when we ask? That would be the logic that Luke would be assuming we would attach to the parable. He wouldn't assume that we would see the unjust judge as a template through which to understand God better. The commentary then continues, putting on to Jesus's mouth, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? Now, the word faith is pistis. It's a very powerful little word. And I think faith or belief, it's also translated as believe or belief, those are not strong translations. I think the stronger translation is trust. So trusting God is more important in a sense than believing in God. Now, it's a little hard to trust in God if we don't believe in God, but the real important thing in my mind with the verb is the trust rather than just having your intellectual sort of world sorted out. Because you can believe in God and not trust in God. Hard to trust in God and not believe in God, but that might even be possible, but the other is totally possible. But it can also be translated as faithfulness, which in the context of this story makes a little bit more sense in my mind. So persistence. Will God, when Jesus comes back to earth, the Son of Man come back to earth, will he find the sort of persistence that is embodied in this widow? So the commentary and our understanding of how Luke understands this parable is, are we, you, all of us, going to be as dogged, as stubborn, as tenacious as this widow in her prayers? Are we going to be like that in our prayers? Some things are only found by perpetually and consistently seeking. Will you be like this, dear reader? That's probably something about what Luke had in mind. But what about if we just look at the parable? This is one of the exercises I love about the parable. So you get multiple stories. You can look at the story as the evangelist understands it, and then you can try and look at the story as maybe it was originally intended. And to do that, one of the steps is to take the commentary and the introduction, just sort of put it to the side for a bit and just look at the story itself. What is the story itself? If you were hearing this without any commentary and without any explanation, what might the story mean to us? And it might mean many things. What I thought when I considered this is we, like the widow, often seek for justice. And often when we're looking for this justice, we're seeking it from agencies, institutions, governments, even churches, what have you, who, like the judge, sometimes do not seem, from all appearances, to even care about justice. They don't care. They just want to get elected again. They just want a job. They just want whatever. And they don't really care. Now, of course, the truth is we don't know really what's going on in anyone's heart or mind. We can't say whether Justin Trudeau really cares or not about any particular thing. Sometimes people in institutions and bureaucracies cannot do what they really want or what they really think because the bureaucracy constrains them, makes that impossible. And this happens all the time, of course, in churches, in governments, in all sorts of, every type of establishment. Anyways, often we are like the widow, standing outside of the halls of power with little status, and we're seeking justice from institutions with all the status and power who don't seem to really care. And the parable, if just looked at in this context, seems to encourage us to be irritating forces, to continue to be irritating forces that persist in being inconvenient and annoying. And the key is persistence. I named this sermon, I don't know if it's in the bulletin, The Virtue of Irritation. Seeking justice from the unjust can be hard work. The parable, and this is another thing that I think is really helpful for us, the parable also encourages us not to worry about the motivations of those in power. Doesn't really matter what Trudeau really thinks or feels. It didn't, just like it didn't really matter to the widow that she really got the judge on board with her case. What mattered to the widow is that the judge did what the widow wanted her to do. So the motivations behind it, not important to the widow, because she didn't get them, right? She didn't get good motivation. She wasn't acting out of any sense of justice. She was acting out of irritation. And so the parable seems to suggest that what's the important thing is not the words, not even a cult of personality. We don't need to like the politicians. We just need them to do the thing that needs to be done. So does the government really, really care about reconciliation? I don't know. Does it really care about climate crisis? I don't know. Does it really care about the opioid crisis? Does it really care about homelessness, poverty, gender equality, LGBT plus rights? I don't know. Do they really? Sometimes I think my hunch is, and I'm just my hunch, is that sometimes they do care, but often that kind of actual care is found at lower levels of government. I find that civic governments, or not always, of course, but sometimes civic governments really do care where their federal counterparts might not. But again, that's just a hunch, and it may not be true across the board. But this parable tells us that it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter with whether Trudeau, Singh, Poilievre, or anyone else really care in their hearts about any of these things. What matters, following the parable, is what they do. And of course, politicians are all great at talking a great game, but this parable encourages us to kind of ignore that and to look at what are they actually doing. And not worry. If you don't think they're doing it for the right motive, that's ultimately not really important. If the judge had told the widow, I will grant you justice, but then a week had gone by and nothing had changed, my hunch is that she would be there the next day giving him another figurative black eye. Therefore, let us be like this widow. Let us be irritating. Let us be exasperating. Let us be frustrating, annoying, and persistent in our dogged, determined search for justice and compassion in our time. Amen.